The rain had been falling since before dawn, the kind that was too soft to hear but too heavy to ignore. It clung to the sidewalks, shimmered on the parked cars along Carolina Lane, and dripped in slow, measured taps from the gutters of the Morgan small craftsman-style home. Inside, the house was warm and quiet, almost too quiet. Daniel Morgan stood by the kitchen window, watching the rain gather in a thin stream along the glass. Normally, mornings were filled with the muffled hum of his wife's hair dryer, the faint soundtrack of her true crime podcasts, or the rustling of cereal boxes as she tried to find something not too sweet for breakfast. Today, none of those familiar sounds existed. The house felt hollow, as if someone had removed all its color while he slept. He checked the time. 6:42 a.m. Emma was usually up by 6. She hated rushing. She hated being late. But today, her side of the bed had been cold when he woke. She hadn't come to bed at all. Daniel frowned and slowly walked back toward the bedroom, replaying last night in fragments. They'd argued right before dinner. Not a big fight, not even a real fight. A stupid one. Something about how she'd forgotten their anniversary dinner reservation again. She'd apologized and blamed her workload at the boutique marketing firm. He'd said it was fine, even though it wasn't. She'd gone to take a shower afterward, and he'd fallen asleep watching the late-night local news. He remembered glancing at the clock around midnight and realizing she still hadn't come to bed. He assumed she was working on her laptop in the living room again. She often did that when she needed space. But this morning, her laptop bag wasn't by the couch. Her phone wasn't on the charger. Her coat, the beige trench she wore almost daily in fall, was missing from the hook. A quiet unease stirred in his stomach. It wasn't just that she wasn't home. It was how she wasn't home. No note. No message. No explanation. Daniel rubbed a hand over his face and forced himself to stay rational. Maybe she'd left early for work. Maybe she couldn't sleep and drove to the office. Maybe she went to the gym at dawn like she used to years ago. But the car keys were still on the counter. She had walked somewhere. In the rain. At night. He opened his phone and checked their messages. The last one from her was at 8:47 p.m. Emma, I'll finish up that proposal after dinner. Don't wait up if I'm slow. Nothing since. He typed a quick message. Daniel, where are you? Everything okay? He hit send. Waited. Nothing. For a moment, Daniel just stood still, listening to the rain outside and the low creak of the house settling around him. He had an odd feeling, one he'd never been able to put into words. A sense that something had been shifting beneath the surface of their marriage, like a quiet river changing its course under a layer of ice. He wasn't paranoid. He didn't jump to conclusions. He trusted his wife. At least, he always thought he did. But over the past few months, she'd grown increasingly distant. She'd begun wearing new perfumes, expensive ones he knew she didn't buy for him. She'd started going out with coworkers on Friday nights but never took pictures, never tagged anyone, never talked about the evenings afterward. She guarded her phone more tightly. She changed her lock screen password. Every time he asked if she was doing all right, Emma said she was just tired. Just tired. Tired of what? Tired of him. Daniel shook off the thought. He wasn't ready to entertain it, not yet. He grabbed his jacket from the closet and stepped into the cool, damp morning. The mist hovered just above the pavement, and the smell of wet earth filled the air. Carolina Lane was still asleep, only a single porch light glowed faintly across the street. He walked around the house to check the driveway again, as if the car might magically appear. It didn't. But something else caught his eye, footprints on the walkway. Faint, muddy ones. Leading away from the house. He crouched down. The shoe size was small, Emma's. The steps were uneven, overlapping in some places. She had left in a hurry. His heart thudded once, hard. Daniel stood and followed the trail down the walkway until it disappeared into the rain-soaked sidewalk. He wasn't sure what he expected to find, a clue, a reason, some piece of evidence that would explain why his wife had vanished for an entire night without a word. He walked 2 blocks under the dim glow of streetlights, searching the puddles, glancing at the driveways of neighbors who were still asleep. The rain had washed away most of the footprints. But he found something else. At the intersection near the bus stop, lying half-hidden near the storm drain, was a small silver charm, a tiny crescent moon on a thin chain. Emma wore it almost every day. Daniel picked it up slowly, his fingers trembling. It wasn't broken. It looked like it had simply fallen off. But why here? Why at this hour? He dialed her number. It rang once. Twice. Then went straight to voicemail. He didn't leave a message. The thought returned, darker this time, heavier, refusing to be ignored. Something was wrong. Something was very wrong. Daniel lifted his gaze, staring down the long stretch of road disappearing into the morning fog. For the first time since he woke, he felt the full weight of what he'd been sensing for months. His wife wasn't just distant. She was hiding something. And whatever it was. He was finally close enough to feel its shape pressing through the dark. Rain soaked through his jacket. The charm lay cold in his palm. The silence of the city wrapped around him like a warning. This wasn't just a missing person mourning. It was the beginning of an unraveling. And he was terrified of what he would find at the end. Daniel finally returned home around 8 a.m., the silver crescent moon charm still resting in his pocket. The house felt different now, no longer quiet in a peaceful way, but subdued, wary, like it was holding its breath along with him. He shook the rain from his jacket and hung it by the door. His phone showed no new messages. No missed calls. Nothing from Emma. He forced himself to breathe slowly as he walked into the kitchen. He brewed coffee because doing nothing felt worse. The hum of the machine and the rising steam gave him something tangible, something normal. He clung to it. At 8:16, his phone buzzed. His heart lurched. For a split second, he prayed it was her. It wasn't. Unknown number, Daniel. It's Grace from Ridgeview Elementary. Are you running late this morning? He closed his eyes. Right. He was supposed to open the school early math lab at 7:30. He taught 4th grade math, steady, predictable, calm. His students relied on him. But right now the idea of explaining multiplication tables felt surreal, even absurd. Daniel, family emergency. Can someone cover? Grace, of course. Take whatever time you need. He stared at the kitchen counter long after the screen dimmed. A family emergency. He had just spoken the words into existence. He grabbed his keys and, after a moment of hesitation, Emma's laptop bag from under the hall table. He didn't want to go through her things, he really didn't. But her disappearance had crossed a line. And somewhere deep inside, he feared the truth wasn't going to appear out of thin air. He wasn't the type to snoop. But he also wasn't the type whose wife vanished overnight without telling him why. He carried the bag into the living room. The dim morning light filtered through the blinds as he placed the laptop on the coffee table. He opened it. Of course, there was a password prompt. He tried her usual ones: birthdays, their wedding date, the name of their dog from childhood. All wrong. He leaned back and rubbed his temples. Another wall. Another locked door. Another secret. His phone vibrated again, this time, a message from his sister, Laura. Laura, you okay? I had a weird feeling this morning. Call me. Laura always had weird feelings. Half the time she wasn't wrong. Daniel typed back. Daniel, not now. I'll call later. He needed to focus. He opened the laptop bag and rifled through it: notebooks, printed proposal drafts, a half-eaten granola bar. Nothing unusual. Until he noticed a small black card tucked into the inner pocket. It was an access card. Matte black. Minimalist. A single silver logo in the corner: the Ridgeview Hotel. Asheville's most upscale boutique hotel. Daniel exhaled sharply. He turned the card over. On the back was a number, not a room number, but a code. A personal access code used for private suites. Something twisted inside his chest. Had Emma been staying there? Meeting someone there? He swallowed hard and forced himself to stay rational. Her marketing firm sometimes hosted events at Ridgeview. She could have been working late. It didn't have to mean what it looked like. But in his gut, he knew. He knew. The rain outside slowed to a soft drizzle. Daniel grabbed the card, shoved it into his pocket, and headed for the door. He needed answers. He needed anything other than the heavy silence that was suffocating him in his own home. The Ridgeview Hotel stood tall over downtown Asheville, wrapped in reflective glass that captured strips of gray sky. The lobby was modern, polished, and smelled faintly of citrus and pine. It was the kind of place people chose for anniversaries, business trips, and secret rendezvous. Daniel wiped his shoes on the mat and approached the front desk. The receptionist, a young man with sharp glasses and an overly formal posture, gave him a polite smile. "Good morning, sir. How can I help you?" Daniel held up the black access card. "Hi. My wife, Emma Morgan, she has a pass for one of your private suites. She didn't come home last night and I'm trying to find her. Could you check if she used this card recently?" It was not elegant. Not subtle. But subtlety had become irrelevant. The receptionist's smile faltered. "I'm not sure I can give out that information." Daniel nodded, swallowing frustration. "I understand. But she's missing. I found this near her things. I'm not trying to invade privacy, I just need to know she's safe." Something in his voice must have landed. The receptionist hesitated, then leaned slightly closer. "I can't tell you much," he murmured. "But I can confirm whether the card was used last night." "Please." The receptionist typed quickly. Daniel watched every keystroke, his heart pounding like a fist against his ribs. A beat. Another. Then the receptionist looked up. The card was used at 10:41 p.m. last night. Daniel's throat tightened. Used. At night. While he was asleep on the couch. Used for which suite, he asked, even though he already feared the answer. "I'm sorry, sir. I can't share that." Daniel exhaled shakily and nodded. "Okay. Thank you." He turned to leave, but the receptionist lowered his voice again. "Sir, if it helps, the suite was checked out this morning at around 6:15. "Checked out?" Daniel whispered. "By who?" "I don't have that information." The receptionist hesitated again, then added quietly, "But two people left together. That's all I can say." The world seemed to tilt for a moment. Daniel steadied himself against the counter. Two people. Leaving together. The charm he found on the street suddenly felt heavier in his pocket. He walked out of the hotel in a fog, barely noticing the drizzle that had restarted. His hand trembled as he unlocked his phone. Still no messages from Emma. He drove home on autopilot, Asheville blurring around him, the old brick buildings, the indie cafes, the slow morning traffic of a mountain town waking up under gray skies. All he heard were echoes of sentences he never wanted to think. Two people left together. He didn't want to jump to conclusions. Not without proof. But the gap between suspicion and reality was shrinking with every minute she stayed silent. He parked the car in the driveway and sat there, gripping the steering wheel. He felt sick. Angry. Afraid. But beneath all of it was something worse, a numbness settling in, as if his body was preparing him for an answer he wasn't ready to face. When he finally stepped out of the car, he saw something on the porch. A damp paper bag. From Blue Horizon Cafe, Emma's favorite breakfast place. Inside was her usual order, an avocado toast bowl and a chai latte, still slightly warm. On top was a sticky note. "We need to talk. E." Daniel stared at the handwriting. Steady. Familiar. But the message felt like a harbinger. "We need to talk." He had waited months for her to say those words. And now, standing on the porch with rain dripping into his collar and betrayal tightening around his ribs, he didn't know whether he wanted to hear her explanation, or if it was already too late to salvage anything at all. He stepped inside, holding the note carefully between his fingers, and braced himself for whatever Emma was finally ready to tell him, or whatever she still intended to hide. The house was dim when Daniel stepped inside, carrying the damp cafe bag and clutching Emma's note like evidence. He kicked off his shoes mechanically and listened, half hoping, half dreading, for any sound that might signal she was home. Nothing. No footsteps. No shower running. No quiet apology whispered from the hallway. Just silence. He placed the bag on the dining table, the chai latte leaving a faint circle of moisture on the wood. The sight felt strangely symbolic, something warm trying to seep into a place already marked with cold. Daniel stared at the note again. "We need to talk. E." Talk about what? Talk about where she'd been. With whom? Why she'd spent the night at a hotel suite he didn't know she had access to. He set the note down carefully, then moved through the house in slow, deliberate steps, the way someone might move through a site of quiet wreckage. In the living room, he sat heavily on the couch, rubbing his palms against his jeans. His mind was racing so fast it felt like it was spinning out of control. He needed to breathe. He needed to think. He needed to prepare himself. The minutes passed in stubborn silence, the kind that makes every small sound echo painfully, the hum of the fridge, the faint tick of the wall clock, the subtle creak of the floorboards in the hallway. At 10:04 a.m., a key turned in the lock. Daniel stiffened. The door opened. Emma stepped inside. For a moment, everything in him stilled. She looked different. Exhausted. Pale. Hair damp from the rain, tied messily at the back of her neck. She wore the same clothes she'd left in the day before, charcoal gray slacks, a burgundy blouse, and the long beige trench coat now clinging to her frame. Her eyes met his. Pain flashed across her face, pain, fear, guilt, something dark and conflicted. She shut the door behind her slowly, as if she were entering a courtroom instead of her own home. "Daniel," her voice cracked. "I'm so sorry." He didn't speak. Not yet. His mouth felt dry, his thoughts crowded with too many timelines at once, their 10 years together, the months of distance, the footprints in the rain, the hotel card burning in his pocket. Emma stepped closer, but not too close. She stood at the edge of the living room, dripping rainwater onto the hardwood floor. "I should have come home last night," she whispered. He inhaled sharply. "Where were you?" Her jaw tightened. She looked away, staring at the framed photos on the bookshelf, the trip to Nashville, the anniversary in Charleston, the hike up craggy pinnacle. All those moments frozen in time, all those memories now feeling like an echo of someone else's life. I was at the Ridgeview," she admitted. Daniel closed his eyes. The confirmation still hurt like a punch. "With who?" he asked, barely above a whisper. Emma swallowed hard. "Daniel, please let me explain." "Answer me," he said more firmly this time. "Who were you with?" She flinched but didn't look away. "With." Her phone buzzed in her coat pocket. She froze. Daniel froze. The sound sliced through the room like a blade. He stared at her. "Answer it." I can't, she said quietly, her voice breaking. Emma. Answer the phone. Her hand trembled as she slowly pulled it out. She turned the screen slightly downward, but he caught a glimpse anyway. A name. A man's name. Aiden Hart, calling. Daniel felt something inside him collapse. Not break, collapse. A hollow, silent implosion. Emma ended the call immediately and shoved the phone back into her pocket. Daniel, please, it's not what you think. Oh. His voice turned sharper. Because what I think is that you spent the night with a man I've never heard of. And based on your reaction, that seems pretty accurate. Emma shook her head desperately. It's complicated. It always is, he whispered. Her eyes filled with tears. For a moment, she looked like the woman he'd loved for years, the woman who used to tell him everything, the woman who used to laugh at his terrible jokes, the woman who rested her head on his shoulder on quiet Sundays. But now she stood before him like a stranger wearing her face. I never wanted you to find out this way, she murmured. Daniel's voice cracked. Then how did you want me to find out? Because disappearing overnight and sending me a breakfast bag on the porch isn't exactly a gentle reveal. She pressed her hands to her forehead. I was going to tell you this morning. I left early because I needed time to think. To figure out how to say it. So say it now. Emma exhaled shakily. Daniel. I made a mistake. He laughed, not because anything was funny, but because the word mistake felt so painfully small. Emma, a mistake is forgetting to buy milk. Cheating on your husband for God knows how long is not a mistake. She flinched again. I didn't cheat for God knows how long. It was only a few. A few what? He demanded. Days? Weeks? Months? She closed her eyes. That silence told him everything. Months, Daniel whispered. Months, Emma. Jesus. She opened her mouth to speak, but he held up a hand. No. Just, tell me who he is. She hesitated, then, he's someone from work. One of our new clients. He came in last spring to consult on a project and, we connected. We connected. Daniel repeated the phrase like it was poison. Great. I didn't mean for it to happen. I didn't go looking for. But it happened anyway, he said sharply. Over and over. Her tears finally spilled. Daniel, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. He turned away, unable to look at her. His chest felt tight, his pulse uneven. He walked toward the kitchen, needing distance, needing air. Emma followed him but kept space between them. He grabbed the sticky note she'd left on the porch and held it up. We need to talk. What were you planning to say? By the way, I've been sleeping with another man for months, but please don't be mad. She shook her head frantically. I was going to tell you everything. I was going to end it with him. Daniel stared at her, anger burning like acid. So you spent one last night with him first? The question hit her like a blow. I didn't, she stopped. Daniel, it wasn't like that. Then what was it? Because from where I'm standing, it looks exactly like that. Emma looked broken, but he couldn't feel sympathy. Not yet. Maybe not ever again. She took a trembling breath. There's more. The words chilled him. More. What more could there possibly be, he asked, his voice hollow. Emma closed her eyes and whispered. I think I'm pregnant. The world went silent. Daniel felt the floor beneath him tilt, the walls push inward, the air leave the room entirely. Pregnant. Pregnant. He stared at her, unable to breathe. And I don't know, she whispered, barely audible, who the father is. Daniel stood perfectly still, frozen in the center of the kitchen as if his body had suddenly forgotten how to function. His breath didn't come. His pulse didn't register. He felt nothing, and yet felt everything at once. Pregnant. And she didn't know whose child it was. His hands trembled. The room around him blurred. The soft hum of the refrigerator sounded miles away. Daniel, Emma's voice was small, fragile. He lifted a hand, telling her not to come any closer. "Don't," he whispered, barely able to form the word. "Please, let me explain." "I said don't." His voice cracked harshly. "I can't, I can't hear anything else from you right now." A tear slid down her cheek. "I wasn't even sure when I found out. I only took the test yesterday morning. I didn't know how to tell you." "So you told him first?" Daniel asked, his tone shaking. Emma closed her eyes. The silence was answer enough. Daniel turned away and gripped the edge of the counter to steady himself. A physical wave of nausea rolled through him. He felt betrayed in more ways than he had ever imagined a person could be betrayed. A wife cheating is one thing. A pregnancy, unknown father. That was devastation with no name. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The clock ticked on the wall, marking each second like a hammer strike. Finally, Emma wiped her tears. "Daniel, I never stopped loving you. I lost myself. I made horrible choices. I was lonely, overwhelmed, insecure, and he made me feel." "Don't," Daniel snapped, spinning around to face her. "Don't you dare tell me he made you feel something. You had a husband right here. A husband trying his best. A husband who would have done anything for you." Her shoulders shook. "I know. And I threw it away. I hate myself for it." Daniel wasn't sure if she hated herself. But he knew one thing. He needed out of this house before he broke. He grabbed his jacket and keys. "Where are you going?" Emma whispered. "Anywhere but here. Please, don't leave like this." "Emma, I can't even look at you." That sentence shattered her. He saw it. He turned away anyway. As he stepped onto the porch, she rushed after him, gripping the doorframe like it was the only thing keeping her upright. "Daniel," she cried, "we can fix this, please, we can figure it out. You and me. We've been together for 10 years. "Exactly," he said bitterly. 10 years. And this is what it meant to you?" He got into the car. His hands shook on the steering wheel. Emma stepped onto the porch, rain dripping off her coat, watching him with devastation carved into her expression. "Daniel. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." He didn't answer. He pulled out of the driveway and left her standing in the rain. Daniel drove without thinking. Past the art district. Past the small shops. Past the mountain roads twisting in fog. He ended up at the one place he always went when life felt too heavy. The overlook at Craggy Gardens. He parked and stepped out. The rain had stopped, but the clouds hung low over the mountains, gray and swollen, like the sky was holding back its own tears. He stood at the railing, staring at the jagged peaks. The wind tugged at his jacket. His chest tightened with grief, betrayal, disbelief. He replayed everything, the distance, the lies, the charm on the sidewalk, the hotel card, the man's name on her phone. He remembered their wedding vows in Charleston, her trembling voice promising honesty and loyalty. He remembered their first apartment, the nights they stayed up planning a family. He remembered the miscarriages. The pain they shared. The hope they clung to. And now. She might be carrying another man's child. Something inside him cracked open, not with anger, but with a kind of mourning deeper than anything he had ever felt. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He ignored it. Then it buzzed again. And again. A call. He glanced at the screen. Aiden Hart. A cold fury rose inside him. He answered the call without thinking. "What do you want?" Daniel said, voice raw. There was a pause. Then a man's voice, smooth, measured, too calm for the situation. "Daniel. I know this is difficult. But we need to talk." "Oh, do we? About what? How long you've been sleeping with my wife?" Aiden exhaled softly. "I'm not calling to fight." "Then why are you calling?" "Because Emma called me earlier. She told me she confessed everything to you." Daniel said nothing. Aiden continued, "I know you're hurting. But I care about her. I care about the baby." "Anne." "The baby?" Daniel's voice cracked violently. "You think it's yours?" "I don't know," Aiden said quietly. "Neither does she. That's why." Daniel hung up. He didn't want to hear anything else. Least of all from him. It took an hour for Daniel to return home, and by the time he stepped inside, his decision was already made. Emma sat on the couch, hugged into herself. Her eyes were red and swollen, her cheeks blotchy from crying. She looked up at him with hope flickering through the wreckage of her expression. "Daniel," she breathed, standing. He didn't speak at first. He walked straight to the bookshelf, pulled out the drawer beneath it, and took out the document folder where they kept important papers. Emma watched, confused, trembling. Daniel set the folder on the coffee table and pulled out a form. North Carolina Dissolution of Marriage Petition. Her breath hitched. "Daniel, no, please, don't." He looked at her with a calmness that was painful, the calmness of someone who had already crossed the emotional breaking point. "This wasn't a mistake," he said quietly. "This was a choice. A series of choices. And I can't spend another day being the man you lie to." Tears streamed down her face. "Daniel, I will do anything, therapy, separation, counseling, anything. I'll cut all ties with Aiden, I'll take a paternity test, just don't leave me." He shook his head slowly. "You left me long before last night." She broke. A sob tore from her throat, raw and desperate. She collapsed to the floor, covering her mouth, shaking uncontrollably. Daniel's heart clenched painfully, because he wasn't cruel, because he still loved her despite everything, because seeing her like that hurt him too. But love wasn't enough anymore. Not after this. He placed the papers in front of her. "I'm staying at Laura's tonight," he said, voice soft but final. "You can stay here. We'll sort out the details later." She looked up at him, grief carved into every line of her face. "Daniel," she whispered, "I ruined everything, didn't I?" He swallowed. "Yes. Do you hate me?" He hesitated. Then shook his head. "I don't hate you. I just can't be with you anymore." Her face crumpled as if the words physically wounded her. He grabbed his duffel bag from the bedroom, packed a few essentials, and walked toward the door. Emma remained on the floor, trembling, unable to control her sobbing. Just as he opened the door, she whispered, "I still love you." He paused, hand on the doorknob. Without turning around, he said softly, "I used to believe that meant something." And then he walked out. 6 months later. Spring arrived in Asheville. The azaleas bloomed. The city's morning fog felt lighter, almost hopeful. Daniel sat on the porch of his new apartment, a small but peaceful place overlooking the river. He sipped his coffee slowly, the morning sun warming his shoulders. His phone buzzed. A single message from Emma. "The baby was born yesterday. It's a boy. The paternity test results came back. He's Aiden's. I wanted you to know. I hope you find someone who gives you the love you deserve. E." Daniel stared at the message for a long moment. No pain. No anger. Just quiet closure. Finally, he typed. "Thank you for telling me. I wish the best for the baby." Take care, Emma. He set the phone down and breathed deeply. For the first time in months, the air felt clean. He glanced beyond the porch railing at the peaceful river and the mountains beyond it, tall, steady, unwavering. Like he was learning to be again. And though his heart still carried scars, it beat with something new. Not bitterness. Not grief. But possibility. A different future. One that belonged entirely to him.